What if you received a friend request from God and it led you to save a stranger's life? The show begins with our protagonist, Miles Feiner, who lives in New York. He's an outspoken atheist who happens to be the son of a prominent pastor. He hosts a popular podcast channel where he frequently defends his belief that there's no God. Miles believes his mission is to help people accept complete responsibility for their lives and stop attributing everything to higher powers. One afternoon, Miles receives a friend request from someone named God on Facebook with a cloud profile picture. He thinks someone is deliberately pranking him and deletes the request. But when the requests keep coming multiple times, Miles reluctantly accepts it. Moments later, he gets a friend's suggestion from God for a man named John Dove. Miles feels confused about this when he bumps into someone on the road. It turns out to be the same guy named John Dove. The bewildered guy then follows John to a subway station, where he notices the latter trying to jump onto the train tracks. Fortunately, Miles immediately intervenes and pulls him back just in time. John gets emotional and thanks Miles before walking away. Not long after, Miles gets another friend's suggestion from God, this time for a beautiful journalist named Kara Bloom. He tells his IT expert friend Rakesh everything and urges him to track down who's behind the account. After some digging, Miles locates Kara and immediately heads to confront her. He asks if she's behind the God account and pranking him, but she has no idea what he's talking about. The next day, Miles approaches Kara again and tells her everything that's been happening. Kara is intrigued by the story and agrees to help him find the prankster if she's allowed to write about it. The duo, along with Rakesh, spend days looking for the person behind the God account, but to no avail. One day, while they are together, Miles's computer suddenly begins glitching and reveals a picture of his family. The photo shows his mother at the hospital with the rest of the family, as well as a doctor and a nurse. The picture shocks Kara for some reason, and she immediately walks out of there. Upon seeing this, Miles realizes that Kara might know someone in the photo. He then goes to his priest father to ask if he remembers the names of the doctor and nurse in the picture. Shockingly, Dad reveals that the nurse is actually Susan Bloom, which makes Miles realize she's Kara's mom. In the next scene, Miles approaches an emotional Kara and tries to comfort her. She then reveals how she was abandoned by her mom, who was a troubled and alcoholic woman. She reveals that the only reason she came to New York was to find her. The truth is, she did find her mother a few weeks ago on a subway, but never dared to approach her ma. In response, Miles opens up, revealing that when he was a kid, his mom was battling cancer, and he used to pray every day for her well-being. She eventually recovered but tragically died in a car crash on her way home from the hospital. This shattered Miles's faith as he couldn't bring himself to believe in a God who would be so cruel. He becomes emotional as he confesses that he would give anything just to be with his mother again. Miles encourages Kara to be brave and reach out to her mother while she still has the chance. The following day, Kara finally approaches her mom and introduces herself while Miles watches from a distance. Both women are emotional upon seeing each other, and Kara questions why she abandoned her years ago. However, the moment is cut short when Susan's other daughter shows up. This enrages Kara, who realizes that her mother has a whole other family in New York. She thus rushes away from there, only to be hit by a car on the road. Fortunately, someone arrives just in time and performs CPR on her. To Miles's shock, the man turns out to be John Dove, who also happens to be a doctor. Later at the hospital, Miles thanks John for his help, but the latter thanks him for saving his life. John reveals that on that day, he was distraught after losing a patient and getting dumped by his girlfriend. He felt so miserable that he decided to end his life. But when Miles pulled him back, John realized he didn't want to die and chose to turn his life around. Afterward, Miles goes to visit Kara, who seems to be fine without any major injuries. They begin chatting when suddenly Kara's mom shows up. She tearfully reveals that she had once come back home when Kara was in 8th grade, but she was too afraid, worrying that if things didn't work out, it would shatter Kara forever. She apologizes for abandoning her and tells Kara that she wants to be a part of her life. Upon hearing this, an emotional Kara decides to forgive her, and the two reconcile. In the aftermath of this incident, Kara writes an article about the experience, which receives a positive response. Miles also shares the story on his podcast, but he still doesn't believe in God and thinks someone is pranking him. Days later, Miles receives a recommendation from God for a woman named Katie Brooks. He and his friends do some investigation on her, wondering if she needs their help. After gathering her information, Miles and Kara head to a diner where Katie works as a waitress. They witness Katie being verbally abused by her boss, and Miles can't stand by. He steps in to defend her, but this turns out to be a mistake, as Katie is promptly fired from her job. Miles tries to talk to her afterward, but she angrily curses at him before storming off. The next day, a remorseful Miles approaches Katie again and apologizes for what happened. He offers to help her in any way he can and asks what he can do. Katie reveals that she has another job interview but needs someone to babysit her autistic son, Nate. She also shares that Nate doesn't communicate with people because he can't speak and maybe can't even hear. The three arrive at a restaurant where Katie asks them not to leave until she returns. Few hours later, Nate notices someone carrying a guitar and immediately follows the person, prompting Miles to chase after him. Nate soon arrives at a music store where he stands in front of the piano. Miles plays a few simple notes and to his surprise, Nate mimics the melody, forming a beautiful tune together. Back at the restaurant, Katie returns and is panicked to see her son missing. She runs into Kara, who calls Miles to find out his location. Upon arriving at the music store, Katie is emotional to see her son playing the piano, but she becomes angry at Miles for bringing Nate here. She asks him never to contact her again and leaves with her son. This makes Miles frustrated, and he tells Kara that he's done with whatever game the God account is playing. However, the next day, Kara and Miles receive news that Nate has suddenly gone missing, and Katie is panicking. The two immediately meet with Katie, who apologizes for her behavior the previous day. She reveals that her son never smiled at her or connected with her, even though she's the one who raised him alone. But after spending just a few hours with Miles, Nate was smiling and playing music, which made her feel jealous and sad. Hearing this, Miles accepts her apology, and the three begin going around town searching for the boy. They eventually find him in Central Park, where he is peacefully playing piano. Katie recognizes the song Beautiful Boy, which she's been singing to him every night after he was born. Miles suggests maybe it's Nate's way of connecting with his mom. This deeply moves Katie, and she sits beside her son at the piano while Miles and Kara look on in awe. The scene then cuts to days later, when Miles gets a notification saying that God is at the Heavenly Taco Truck. He quickly heads there with Kara and Rakesh but can't figure out who might be behind the account. Just then, a kid rushes by and unexpectedly steals Miles' wallet before running away. Miles thinks he might be connected to the account and follows him, but the boy disappears into thin air. At this moment, Miles receives another friend suggestion, a man named Ray Nicolette, who's a retired NYPD cop and private investigator. With this, Miles and Kara go to meet Ray and hire him to find the kid who stole the wallet. The old man doesn't understand why they'd hire a private investigator over something so small, but he agrees to take the case. Later, Miles and Kara decide to investigate Ray himself and begin following him around. They soon learn that Ray lost his wife, Abby, a year ago and visits her grave every day, talking to her as if she is still alive. However, while stalking the old man, he ends up catching them and asks why they are following him. Miles has no other choice but to tell him the truth about the God account and how it led to him. He claims that he doesn't care about the wallet but wants to find the person who's pulling this prank. Ray doesn't believe there's actually a God behind it, but he decides to help them anyway. Days later, they eventually find a kid named Isaac who had stolen the wallet. Ray, Kara, and Miles go to his place and confront him about his actions. Ray even threatens to call the cops, and the terrified kid confesses that someone had hired him to steal the wallet. He claims not to know who they were, but gives them the address of the place where he delivered it. With this lead, the three head to the address Isaac provided. But when they arrive, They're shocked to learn that it's an abandoned lot and Isaac had fooled them. Sometime later, Miles receives a credit card fraud notification and discovers that someone tried to transfer money from his account to a prisoner. He and Kara immediately rush to Isaac's place and are shocked to find police officers taking him away. It turns out Isaac's mom is in prison and he's been living on his own ever since. One of the officers tells Miles that since the boy has no known relatives, he'll be placed in foster care. It's also revealed that the only person Isaac was close to was a social worker named Abby, but she passed away last year, leaving him devastated. Upon hearing this, Kara and Miles are stunned to realize that the social worker Abby was none other than Ray's late wife. They immediately go to see the old man and share the news. They also encourage Ray to consider adopting Isaac, reminding him that the boy will otherwise end up in foster care, where who knows what kind of environment he might end up in. Ray becomes emotional, but is hesitant to take on such a big responsibility. However, after a tearful conversation at his wife's grave, he changes his mind. In the end, he welcomes Isaac into his home, determined to provide him with the good life Abby would have wanted. Even after this heartwarming incident, Miles remains an atheist and is convinced that someone behind the God account is playing an elaborate prank on him. One day, while Rakesh is trying to hack into the account, an unknown bug causes all the computers in his department to freeze, displaying a strange error code. As he looks closer, Rakesh realizes the code reads Error 1.61, a number he recognizes as the golden ratio from the Fibonacci sequence. At this moment, Miles gets a notification that the God account is at the Hayden Museum, so he, Kara, Rakesh, and Rakesh's girlfriend all head there to find the person behind it. Upon their arrival, Rakesh and his girlfriend split up from Miles and Kara to cover more ground. As they look around, Kara spots a woman who trips and spills her coffee and immediately tells Miles she's their girl. Next, Kara quietly follows the woman into the bathroom, determined to find out more about her. Once inside, she approaches her and strikes up a conversation. The woman introduces herself as Fliss and reveals she's from Nebraska. Fliss shares that she came all the way to New York in search of her soulmate, a man she met at summer camp nearly 20 years ago. The only clues she has are his name, Jim Smith, and an old list of his favorite places in the city. Upon exiting the bathroom, Kara introduces Miles to Fliss and shares her story. The duo believes this is their next mission and decides to help the woman. The three then start visiting all the places from Jim's list, hoping to track him down. Meanwhile, Rakesh and his girlfriend come across a man who's leading a tour at the Fibonacci Planetarium. Rakesh starts to suspect that the tour guide could be behind the God account and decides to approach him. During the tour, Rakesh notices his deep interest in coding, which makes him even more suspicious. After the tour ends, Rakesh approaches him in his office and questions him about the God account, but the tour guide has no idea what he's talking about. He reveals that he's simply using open source code to analyze astronomical data and locate a star. The two men then introduce themselves and we learn that the tour guide is none other than Jim Smith. Elsewhere, Miles runs Jim Smith's birthday through the Identity Seal database and finds out he works at the planetarium. He immediately calls Rakesh, who informs him that Jim is with him at the moment. Excited, Miles quickly informs Kara and Fliss, and the three of them rush over. When they arrive, Jim is shocked to see Fliss after so many years. He can't believe she still remembers him and kept his list of the favorite places. The two share an emotional reunion, and she expresses her feelings for him. But Jim suddenly drops a bombshell: he's actually gay. Though Fliss is initially disappointed, she's still happy to have found him and decides to stay in New York to begin a new chapter in her life. In the meantime, Rakesh rewrites Jim's complex code and successfully finds the star Jim had been desperately searching for. The discovery fills everyone with joy, especially Jim, who decides to name the star Fliss in honor of his best friend. In the evening, Kara and Miles are heading home, and it's clear that they've started developing feelings for each other, though both are too embarrassed to admit it. Miles thus musters all his courage and decides to ask her out, but before he can do so, they're interrupted by a man, Eli, who turns out to be Kara's ex. It turns out that Eli and her ex had once been deeply in love, but they didn't work out for some reason. The two are happy to see each other, and Eli suggests they catch up over drinks, to which Kara agrees. Upon hearing this, Miles experiences a wave of disappointment and decides to back off as the episode comes to an end. If this video hits 1,000 likes or 100 comments, we'll drop the next part. Thanks.